Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders, a safe space for women to thrive in community where their voices and stories are heard. We're a sisterhood supporting each other to live our dreams and embody the sacred feminine to restore balance on our planet. Join us each week as we return to the unconditional love and guidance of our heart and our womb. I'm your host, Meredith Ram, and I invite you to walk this path of beauty, devotion, and service with us. I'm here today with Thérèse Cator, who is a mother, leadership coach, and healer. She's also the founder of Black Girls Breathe, and this year she led a worldwide global healing day for thousands of Black, Indigenous women of color. Most recently, she's guided over 1,000 white and white-passing people for Becoming Human, a series of lessons to dismantle white supremacy and center the liberation and healing of Black, Indigenous people of color. She's devoted to guiding visionary women show up rooted to their unique vision, gifts, and leadership to weave the new world. She brings over a decade of experience in the wellness industry, as well as her education, experience, and knowledge in nonprofit development, teaching, social justice, business, and the arts. At the core, her work is rooted in love, liberation, and community. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Meredith. I'm really honored to have this conversation.
Yeah, I was taking some time to look through your About page this morning, and one of the things I read, you had all these beautiful facts of just like getting to know you better, and that you actually turned down a lucrative job to follow your dream. And I thought that might be an interesting place to start of just, I feel like so many of the women I talk to have a deep calling, and a lot of the women I work with as well, it's like they feel they are here for something. There's some kind of deeper purpose. And I'd love to hear your journey of just like, what was your calling? What was that time in your life like when, you know, things are going along and then it's like suddenly pivoting and like, actually, I'm going to follow this new path. Love to start there.
Oh, that's such a good question. I've never been asked that question. Oh, that's such that's a spiral, like a rabbit hole almost. But what I will share was that during that time, my dream was, I guess it's the same. At the core, it's always been about creating a better world. And at the time, I was focused on wanting and working in entertainment, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. So the job that I was offered was at this New York City financial company, and working with one of the founders. And it was, a lot of money. And it just didn't feel right. It wasn't what I truly wanted to do. I really wanted to continue pursuing the life of an artist. So I said no. And I continued my studies, and then that eventually actually led me to Los Angeles, which actually set me on a whole new path. Little did I know. So that's like the short version of the story. I mean, and then once I got into Los Angeles, one of the things I realized was that I love the arts. However, the entertainment industry as a whole, I did not like that part. I felt there was like this, it was a disconnect of like what I felt for me art is supposed to be. One of my favorite quotes is by Nina Simone, and she says, an artist's job is to reflect the times. And artists throughout history have been revolutionaries. So that's how I view the arts. I view actually everything that I do from that lens. And it wasn't that experience that I had. It was more around, things being packaged and branded, and art being used as a vehicle for capitalism. That's to put it essentially. However, the good news that it really led me to an even deeper calling of the work that I do now, which is around guiding and helping women to show up rooted, so that we can really weave the new world, which is from the inside out.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And what I'm hearing in all of this is that your intuition was really a guide for you. And I mean, there are some challenges we face when we're just making choices in our lives. I mean, the first is just, how do I even hear my intuition? How do I even understand and listen to that voice? But then also, like, how do I actually have the courage to take the steps when I receive the guidance? Do you have any thoughts on that? If anyone out there listening might be in one of those places.
I have to say that it can be more difficult at times than others. And, at that time in my life, I wasn't a mother yet. I hadn't given birth. Like, now I'm a mom. And so for me, and I was like, oh yeah, let me just move and do this. And I was like living with roommates. I lived all over the place. And however, a few years after I had moved to LA, I had given birth. My son was only a few months old, and I woke up. It was January 1st, 2017, and I woke up with a very deep knowing it was time to leave Los Angeles. But here I was with a newborn baby, and it was like, where to go? And it felt very overwhelming. However, my intuition spoke really clearly as to what to do. So I feel that when we listen to our intuition doesn't have that that negative self-talk, right? It doesn't. It kind of says it in a very neutral way. I feel like it's whether you relate to your higher self, or it's the voice of God, or the voice of, wisdom, whatever you relate to. What I've always found is that my intuition is neutral. So it's kind of like says something matter of fact, whereas the voice of fear, it always comes with a charge. So if someone is having trouble listening to their intuition, I think it's about finding that discernment, whether there's a charge to the voice or not. Is it neutral, or is there a charge? And by doing that work, that discernment work, you can really gauge as to whether it's truly the voice of intuition or it's the voice of fear. And then, with the voice of intuition, the truth is that because our intuition doesn't tell us, oh, if we go down this path, it's wrong, or go down this path, it's right. It's really choices. So there are lessons down both paths. So there are lessons down the path of, if you listen to your intuition, you're going to learn a series of lessons. If you don't, you're going to learn a series of lessons as well. What I found for me is that when I listen to my intuition, a lot of the times the lessons are rooted in love, opposed to suffering. More suffering. Not to say that the path is like not bumpy and there are not obstacles or challenges, but I found that the path is more rooted in love. Like when I made that choice and I told my partner, like, okay, I have a retreat planned a few months from now, and on that day, when I get on the plane, I'm not coming back. Like, really think that was the plan. That was the extent of my plan. And from there, it really led to finding our home. And it was like a series of miraculous little events that occurred, and we had family members who put us up. We were sleeping in a full, was it a twin? No, it was a full size, a very small full size bed with a baby in the middle. So, living out of a suitcase with, a baby under 1 year old. Yeah, there were challenges. However, I was like, I'm so glad I made that choice because, it led me here. And I feel like, oh yes, I'm in the right place right now.
Mm-hmm. I love how those miracles come in when we make those when we listen and take those steps, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, things start to fall into place. It's relieving. I'm curious, you mentioned becoming a mother, and I would love to hear just how that changed your life. What was that experience like for you? Who are you now that you know that you weren't before? That moment is so life-changing.
Yeah, it's like my mom had said that, oh, this is my baptism by fire. That's how I would sum it up. And it's so much love. My son, his name is Isaiah. He's 3. And it's so much love. And then at the same time, it pulls me to my edges of like patience. And there's no limit to the amount of love that he's able to give, which pushes me to open my heart even more. So it's like this thing of like always being tired all the time and then loving this human being so much, like with all my being and all my soul. And it's constantly living in those polarities. And, for me, I feel like, yes, I birthed him. And I know so many people have said this, but I feel like he birthed me. And that first year of being a new mom, I literally felt like, where am I most of the time? Like, what's going on? Where am I? Not really in my body. And it was really interesting for me. It was exactly 9 months after I gave birth that I started feeling back into my body. And it was actually the same day that my menstrual cycle started. It was like 9 months exactly. And then I started feeling more into who I was. But it's a constant process. And whenever I think, oh, I got the hang of it, not so much. It's like something else. Like there's another curveball. But it's a joy, and it's so much work, and it requires, as you know, you're a business owner and being at home. Now we're in the middle of a pandemic. He had just started preschool last September. So that got, closed. So it's just a lot also with the time of our lives, the world that we're going through with the uprising, with COVID-19. So all of that adds to the experience of being a mother. Like, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. A lot of layers on top of already just facing the ups and the downs and the beauty and the challenges, and that feeling out of body experience. Do you think that was sleep deprivation, or do you think that was like a more spiritual kind of experience going on?
Sleep deprivation, 100%.
Thank you for sharing. I wanted to ask you, I was reading an article on your website about 15 years of meditation. Amazing. To be dedicated in that way. And you spoke to something in that article that I've thought a lot about, because as an entrepreneur and getting into the kind of that wellness scene, and when I was first starting my business, there was a lot of talk about law of attraction and manifestation and kind of like creating this perfect life. And I'd love to actually just read this this piece from your article to everyone listening, and then just to hear more from you. So you wrote, in recent years, I've noticed that we're being marketed meditation and committing to a spiritual practice as means to manifest the perfect life. These tips and tricks guarantee that nothing will ever go wrong as long as we're positive and focusing on love and light 24/7. To me, this misses the point and feeds into the racist, patriarchal system that breaks us and then sells us stuff to fix our brokenness. No, thank you. Slavery, genocide, world hunger, hate crimes were not manifested by the victims. Heartbreak, loss, illness can happen to anyone, regardless of mindset. So much of what we experience is a result of systems of oppression created by those who abuse power and leverage pain and suffering for their personal gain time and time again. Can we still consciously create our experiences? Yes. However, ignoring overarching systems conveniently blinds us from the injustices that exist and keep us from confronting these systems. It's detrimental and dangerous to ourselves, our families, our earth, and all of its inhabitants. And when I read that, I was thinking about how that mindset of just like law of attraction and manifesting in our lives, it almost like perpetuates this idea that if something bad happens in our life or something hard happens or we experience pain, it's almost like we feel like we failed in some way, which is so not the case, because it's like this is hard things happen, and a lot of time pain is the entrance into like our deeper truth and knowing and understanding and feeling the world and being able to really drop into our bodies and how we need to act and move forward. And you go on in the article to share about just responding to life and feeling our grief and our pain. And love to just talk to you about all of this and hear more of your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. I wrote that. It was nice hearing your voice. Read that. I wrote that over a year and a half ago. And what really comes really present is what you shared around definitely, the push to law of attraction and manifestation. And it was like, it's your fault if you're not manifesting things at the right way and your life isn't perfect. And it always felt wrong. Like, that's so great. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel right in my body. And the thing is, I think we can't ignore the systems, right, that we live under, and these systems that were created on purpose to oppress specific people. And those specific people are Black, Indigenous people of color. And we're currently in the United States, Turtle Island. However, the system, which overarching white supremacy, patriarchy, it's actually now worldwide, right? And it looks different ways all over the world. However, if you have a system that creates oppression, it's not about manifestation. And I think the folks who've talked about law of attraction, they're well-meaning. They could be well-meaning and just don't know. However, that not knowingness and not being informed causes a lot of harm. And I really, truly believe that as leaders, as women identified people, is that part of our path is to create a world that works for all. And to do our part to do that, to have equality, to have justice, to have clean water, to have resources. And that's going to take imagining things differently. It's also going to take dismantling, uprooting things that haven't worked. And that work is both an internal job as well as an external job as well. So I'm glad to see that the tides have started to turn. And the other part is that there's a mystery in life. There's an unknown aspect to life. And it's very much the ego, right? To want to know everything, to want to even fix everything. That's very much our ego selves. But if we can let go and step into more of, okay, the unknown. I don't know everything. I don't necessarily have all the answers. I don't necessarily know why this is happening. Meaning, and when I say this, I'm talking about not the overarching systems, but more so like if someone gets ill, right? I don't know. And sometimes if we can be with that unknown, it allows us to sink into humility and really see our space in the ecosystem, which is more of a circle than a hierarchy, because I feel like for humans, right, for humans, we kind of place ourselves, if we see it as like a triangle, we place ourselves at the very top of the triangle and everything else is at the bottom. But when we are able to just be with the unknown, it places us in a circle, in the cycle, and realizing within that cycle there's death, birth, death, birth, rebirth, and it just goes around and around and around. And so that's what I sit with. I try to also, with all of that, say, there's an unknown too, and to be within that mystery is a part of our own evolution, and it ignites our compassion for ourselves, for one another. It's not so much about being like, oh, just because I don't know, I'm not going to necessarily do anything, but recognizing that we're not at the top of the hierarchy. It's not a hierarchy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And you go on in that article to say we are all powerful creators, and there are things that occur in our lives and in the world that's outside of our control and understanding. And it reminds me of, I recently interviewed a woman who shared a little bit about her journey of trying to become pregnant or to find a partner and then to have a child, and how she kept seeing all these articles of like, well, you just need to do X, Y, and Z to like call in your perfect partner and like love yourself. And she's like, I've done all of that. And there's something like more mysterious going on that we can't always know or control or make happen the way, like life isn't about getting everything we want and getting like making this perfect thing. It's like, it's so much about being in that listening and that collaboration and surrender. And like, yeah, what you said about humility and being in the unknown, it's really, powerful. That's a lot of, there's so much we don't know. And when I think of that pyramid, it's like humans and our ego, we think we control it all and can make things happen our way, but there's such a deeper mystery. And I think for women in particular, like, I wonder if the women you work with that are wanting to use their vision, their gifts to be in their leadership, how do you guide them from like kind of being in the unknown can sometimes feel like debilitating in some ways, or just feeling like the world needs so much change and there's so much that needs to happen. And how can my little input even make a difference? How do you guide women in your work, and what does that look like?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think there's so many ways in. And one of the ways that I find has been helpful for me, which is the reclamation. And I guess I should give maybe just a tiny bit of background. My dad passed away in 2012. And at the time I was living in LA, and, life was good. Like I was, doing work that I loved. I had clients. My work at the time was more focused on helping people create aligned messages for their online marketing, and doing that work. Although I was doing coaching work also at the side, like people were like coming to me for spiritual stuff too, right? But that wasn't what I led with. And when my dad passed away, it really brought me to my knees. That's what it did. It brought me to my knees, and with all the grief. And my dad, he was a scholar. He was a brilliant mathematician. He also was a medicine man and a healer. And at that time, I realized that, so many of my gifts I was hiding it, right? I was hiding many, many of my gifts. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to bring this more out into the world. So about a year and a half after my dad passed away, another huge incident happened in my life. And that was when I was wrongly stopped by the Los Angeles Police Department because a white person called the police on my partner and I. And it led to a situation. I'm not going to go into great detail, but it led to a situation where we could have lost our lives. It was a very dramatic situation out of like what you would say is a Hollywood movie, but it wasn't, it didn't have any of the directors. It was actually our real lives. And I remember being in that situation and literally looking up at the sky and just saying, okay, God, if I make it out alive, use me in whatever way, show me the path. And I think with those instances, and then of course becoming a mom, there was so much about myself that was covered up within the gunk of, dominant culture of our society, like how women are supposed to behave or how you're supposed to look. So I really started looking at all of those things and questioning everything. And I was fortunate enough that growing up, my mom, she raised me, she's a spiritual person, and she also was an activist. So on the weekends, she would take us to rallies. We would be stuffing envelopes, like pretty much as many weekends as I can think. Growing up, we were doing that. So I learned from her that, spirituality and activism, it actually goes together. So the journey was about reclaiming my voice, reclaiming my body, reclaiming parts of my roots that weren't accepted by our culture or wasn't even recognized. And some of that work also was because, I come from, I'm a descendant of people who were enslaved. Not all of it are things that I can research in a book. So a lot of it was things that were revealed through meditation, through prayer, through communion, and doing that work. Like my father even would come to me in dreams and show me medicine. So having trust also that all of the wisdom that we all contain, it lives within us. It's in our bones. It's in our blood. It's in our marrow. It's in our breath. And even if, let's say, every single history, and I put that in air quotes because we know so many of those books, it's really, most of it has erased especially the histories of Black, Indigenous people of color. And a lot of what we have is oral tradition for many of us. So even if every single book were burned and all we had left is our bodies, through our bodies, we can access so much wisdom. So for me, that work looks like integrating modalities such as breath work, energy work, and also some somatic work in addition to coaching. And that's like the portal through, because I truly believe like when women reclaim the parts of themselves that they have lost, that they've forgotten, or they've been disconnected from for so long, we're able to show up for ourselves. We're able to show up in the world in ways that we couldn't before, in ways that are true, right? It's not about perfection. It's about it being ways that are true. So it also is about, standing in our activism, in our partnerships. But then it has an impact on the world, the things that we do. So that's the long version of like how I bring women back to themselves. Like what's the work that we do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can so relate, and in just the work I do with women as well. It's like when we get into the body, and when there is like so many deeper layers can be revealed of our ancestry and of just things we didn't know, and new ways we can look at our experiences and places where we feel hurt or pain or limiting beliefs. It's like that it's held in our bodies, and a lot of liberation can come through that. I know breath work too is amazing. I use EFT tapping as another way of just like getting into the body. Yeah, and what you shared too of just this prayer, please use me, that I've found to be like one of the most powerful prayers of just, I offer my will to your will, and to just be in that total place of humility and surrender. And I not only like, I think that leads us into that deeper place of purpose and knowing and just fulfillment, really, of like actually what we're here to be doing. And not always easy, but but I've also just found that prayer to be just the most powerful, really, in trying to seek guidance and move forward in life.
Yeah, I love that prayer. There's a beautiful song by Ricky Byers that says, use me. And she goes, use me, oh God, I stand for you. And obviously you can substitute God, but it's such a beautiful song, Use Me. And I used to sing that song every single day before I started my day. And it was just a beautiful practice to allow what wants to emerge.
Beautiful. Yeah. A question I often ask women on the show is when we are taking these steps to really be on our path and to serve, that often fear comes up, and especially around being seen or using our voice or any number of ways. And I'm curious for you, as you've stepped more into your path and also just as an entrepreneur, and what are, if any, like big fears that have come up along the way, and how did you navigate them and or face them, and any wisdom you might have for anyone listening who's in that place?
Oh, that's such a juicy question. And fear, oh, such a good one. I feel like it's just a constant thing. And you think that, oh, we're going to get to, at least I can say, I'll speak for myself, like, oh, I'll get to a place with fear and it'll be fine. However, no, I find that every time, if I'm continuing to push my edges, like to stretch, to grow, fear always comes up. And that fear usually comes in the sense of like, and I don't know if you relate, but when you've done a lot of personal work, fear becomes a trickster. And you have to be really attuned to like catch it, because it doesn't necessarily show up in the same ways that it did, many years ago when I was first on my journey. But I would say when I really felt it was time to move away from the work that I was doing and into the work that I was doing around online marketing, and move into this more deeper spiritual work, there was a lot of fear around like, well, what will people think? What will my current clients? I'm going to lose all my clients. I'm gonna, all of this stuff is going to happen. And also so that was around the time my dad passed away. And then when I had that experience with the LAPD, and I've had other experiences in my life that had to do with racism, but that was one where it was visceral. Like I really almost lost my life that night. And I felt like I had to speak and talk about social justice. So, what will people think? Oh, I feel like now more people are having those discussions. But when I was saying it, talking about it, a lot of people were just, kind of rolling their eyes and, gaslighting me, essentially. And for me, what has always helped me is to know that I'm connected to a deeper truth. And a lot of times, I feel like this can be the case for many, many folks who are women, who identify as women, is a part of it is that we are the creators, right? Regardless of whether you birth children or not, but the seed of creation is within us. And a lot of times we can tap into things that might not be even quote unquote in the norm right now. And in order to birth what's coming, what's the next, the next phase of evolution, we have to surrender to deep, deep trust. So to me, a lot of times the antidote to fear is just an ounce or even a teaspoon of trust. Mm-hmm. You don't have to get rid of the fear, just a teaspoon of trust. And what would trust have me do in this moment? What's the very next step that trust? And it could be a very tiny step. And then it'll be another step, and then it will be another step, because there's so many women who are suppressing their voices. They want to maybe have a podcast. They want to have a business. They want to go to coaching school, or they want to finish up their degree, or go back to school, or have a child, whatever it is, or start a women's circle in their community. And all of it is so valid. And when we say no, we're not only saying no to ourselves, we're saying no to all of the people that we can possibly impact with our work. Mm. So that's one of the things that's helped me with fear, is to actually not make it about me. Also, it's not about me, it's about being of service. And as much as possible, being of service, not being a savior, being of service. And when I'm truly of service, it goes full circle, because I get gifts from being of service too, right? I get lessons from being of service too. So kind of going back to your question, one of the things that I always say to women who I work with is that, in my program, Circle of Reclamation, I always say that although this program came through me, however, I actually also do the work right alongside you. So, for example, this month we're exploring the theme of courage. I'm exploring the theme of courage too. And for me, it's just about, it's a spiraling deeper. Right? It's just spiraling deeper into what is courage. So, yeah, so that's a couple of things I can share, and I hope that resonates with someone, at least one person listening about fear.
Yeah, definitely. Feels like, uh, because that was a big part of my journey. And when I started this podcast and when I started, sharing on social media and all of that, it was so scary. And what you said of just like when we say no to that, we're also saying no to all the people we could impact with our work. I just think of, the people that listen to this and that write to me. And it's just like, wow, thank goodness I had the encouragement and the trust that at that time to take those steps. And of course, it was really scary, and there are still new edges and to grow into. But those words, those words will stay with me. They're very, very powerful. Yeah, and I have to think where to take this from here. I have a couple questions more I would love to ask, and I think, I think one thing I want to ask is just we obviously went through a really intense time around looking at racism in our culture. And one of the things that in my conversations with people of color that I've become aware to is that in seeing so much violence in the media against people of color can actually be very re-traumatizing. And I would love to hear any words you have around what you've done to take care of yourself through these times, and for any people of color maybe listening, just like how to really take care of themselves through these times where old trauma can be coming up to the surface.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And, I feel that we're still in the midst of so much of it. And just yesterday, I was speaking to someone who shared about their work that they're doing in Minneapolis. And for some people, I know as the news cycle changes and we're moving towards election season, there is, the focus changes. However, it's still so present. And for anyone who identifies as either Black, Indigenous, person of color, one of my practices, I can say, is actually not looking at those violent videos, because for me, it's really been around that I already have experienced so much of that violence in my life. So I personally have made that choice not to take that in, because I feel it so viscerally, especially given the circumstance I was in with the police myself. So I think it's also around having good boundaries with what it is you're going to take in or not, and not having to make to be sorry for not doing that, because we're living those experiences. And I would also share that, the practice of being in community is really important, being in sacred community. So earlier this year, I had led, actually it was a virtual global healing day specifically for Black, Indigenous women of color. And it was really interesting. At the beginning of this year, I kind of always get messages about the year at like January 1st. And the message was around, this is the year to hold a lot of like grief circles. And I didn't really understand what that meant. Obviously, I understand it now, but there's a lot of collective grief that we're carrying. And for anyone who identifies as someone of color, Black, Indigenous, person of color, there's a lot of grief that we're carrying individually and collectively. And it's important to be in spaces where we can safely share that. So I was also led to create some circles specifically for, I have for Black women, other ones specifically for Black, Indigenous women of color, so that they can really process the racial trauma. That's what it is. It's racial trauma. And there's not enough space to let that go. So what I would say is that to your listeners who identify as white and white presenting people is to really support that work, really support that work, because as we are, navigating, dismantling white supremacy, which is, I hope every single person who holds privilege, who's a white person who has privilege, is doing that work, because that is spiritual work. At the same time, there are people, women, who are living these realities day in and day out. So it's important to support that work. And for the Black, Indigenous women of color listening, take care of yourself, get into a circle where you can to share about your experiences. And no, you're not, seeing things or making things up. And it's important to have that validation. So that's what I would share.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it's sacred when we can come together in a space with like-minded people and get to just be witnessed. And so much healing can happen in that. What other words of wisdom may you have around just stepping into devotional, radical, true allyship? Perhaps there's people out there thinking wanting to step into activism, maybe for the first time. Any thoughts of just where to start or what that means to you or could look like?
Oh, that's like a whole other interview. But yes, I have so many thoughts. And, it's really around dismantling internalized and external white supremacy. And I would say that it's now if you're a white person listening, you're being called to do that work in conjunction. So because of the times that we're in, you might feel like there are many different balls up in the air. So you might be learning about history. What is the real history? Learning about if you're in America or wherever you are in the world, what is the true history? What didn't you learn? Because that's actually the foundation of what shapes culture, what has shaped society to look that way, and understanding that history. And it's going to be, it's going to be shocking. It's going to be traumatizing or feel traumatizing. However, I think it's important to know that, that trauma that you might be experiencing, like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Real people are still living the effects of it. Mm-hmm. So I think learning about history and then building resilience around shame. Mm-hmm. So resilience around shame. And there's so much I can say around shame, but shame is a feeling that you receive oftentimes, not when you're being shamed, but if you feel ashamed. And that's something that so many white people have shared with me, just feeling this sense of shame. It's really a tool to allow you to align with what is true, with what is right. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you use that as a tool, like either you can collapse under shame or you can use it as a tool to carve a new path. And that new path is truly stepping into what it looks like to be an ally or an accomplice or a co-conspirator. To say, I stand for justice, I stand for liberation of all people, and I'm going to play my part. So there's so many different pieces. There's a spiritual component to activism. And so I weave that into the work of even dismantling white supremacy. I think it's really important to look at it from that lens.
Yeah. That's been my experience too. It's deeply spiritual, deeply confronting those parts within yourself and actually feeling the grief and the pain and moving through the shame. There's so much to be gained on the other side. And I would just encourage that for people listening, because it can feel scary, I think, in the beginning of just like, oh, it's so much to look at. Can I really do this? Can I really look at it? But when we do, and of course go at our pace, I have one teacher who always reminds me, like, we're in a marathon, not a sprint. And to see that, this is a lifelong journey, and to really align. I love that, using the shame as a tool to align with what is right. And we have a lot of opportunity to weave this new world that you've been sharing about. And I'd love to hear just what you are excited about in any of your offerings, or what's coming up in your business, or anything you'd like to share with people about how they can stay in touch with you or learn more about your work.
Thank you, Meredith. I'm going to be hosting a beautiful free workshop. It's called Get Free, and you can find more about it at getfree.world. So getfree.world. And I'll send you the link as well. But it's going to be a beautiful 2-hour workshop, and it's really a workshop. So we're doing the work, and there is a workbook with it, and it's really about weaving personal and collective healing and liberation, and ways to do that.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I look forward to seeing that and learning more, and we'll include the link in the show notes. And do you have any other closing words, anything you'd love to leave us with?
Yeah, I guess I just want to say thank you so much for this conversation. It went, I know in the beginning, you led us through a beautiful meditation. And I just feel that I truly hope that this conversation inspires whoever listens to it. And I trust that the right people, women, will listen to it, and it will land in their hearts. And really, the prayer is that it spurs action. This conversation is a seed that has been planted, and the next steps, it's about nurturing, cultivating that seed so that the fruit can appear, right? And it takes time. It's a cycle, but just continuing to nurture the seeds that you plant so that they can bloom. Sometimes they might not bloom, and you can compost them. It goes back into the soil. But that's what I want to offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd love to just bring it back to what I was asking about in the beginning of just our intuition, and I'm just closing my eyes and tuning back into the body, and just inviting everyone to see how this conversation lands for you in your body, and to just kind of let it gestate, and what action wants to be spurred from here. And it's going to be different for everyone. And our intuition is that tool of just to guide us to the right next thing, and the right people we need to meet, or the right steps we need to take, and to listen to that, because there's so much grace in what you shared of just our intuition guides us to lessons rooted in love. So thank you so much for being here. Big bow to you and for all the work you're doing, and also to everyone else here listening and showing up and doing their work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. If you liked it, share it with a friend, or leave us a review on iTunes. You can also follow along on Instagram at Rising Woman Leaders, and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com to be sure to receive all the new and inspiring content. Thanks again for being here.